Welcome to the House of Truth. Hope you have your tissues ready. Today is a sad subject. I'm not generally a person that cries a lot. Didn't cry at the funeral of my didn't cry after my grandmother's died, and they raised me pretty much. Didn't cry when my own mother died, and I was there when she died. Never have. Not really much of a crier. But this thing we're going to talk about today is the one thing that gets to me. It always gets to me, I should say. I'll do my best to keep it together. As you'll see, we're going to talk about Passover in isolation by itself, away from the associated holidays. You're going to see how sad this really is. You observe Passover, you don't celebrate it. Exodus 12, 1 through 5. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be to you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak you unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb of a house, for a house. And if the house will be too little for a lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of souls. Every man according to his eating shall you make account for the lamb. And your lamb shall be without blemish, a male the first year, and you shall take it out from the sheep and from the goats. Well, really a lot packed into this first one here, but first thing I want you to know is they're still in Egypt, 9 plagues, Pharaoh hadn't budged. Next, this month is the beginning of the month. And the month, and we'll go in a little more detail of exactly when that month is. But this month, when they're when they're to do this, is the first month of their calendar. And it's not misnamed Rosh Hashanah, the 7th month, according on the biblical calendar. But the word Rosh Hashanah is only used one time, and it's used this month, the first day of this month. It's important you get the months right, because all the festivals, everything tell a story, so you want to get the story in the right order, because it doesn't make sense otherwise. And notice on the 10th day of that month, on the 10th day of this month, they had to bring it. They had to take a lamb, and what they meant, they had to bring it to their house. Normally, they might just, depending on circumstances, they might get a lamb that's already been killed and dressed, or they might pick one out, and they hang it up some tree and kill and dress it and bring just a meat home and whatever, and maybe split up with people or whatever. But this one's different. This one, the instructions were to bring it and tie it into your house, which meant they tie it to their doorpost. It's a little post outside their house. And then they had to feed it and water it, and the kids pet it and probably gave it a name, and so on and so forth. And they became familiar with it. But how do we know if it's too little? Well, it's by the count. And a grown lamb, lamb of the first year, will feed about 12 grown men, like Jesus and the 12 apostles at the Last Supper. So his neighbor. So now, next thing I want you to notice is if you don't have 12 and you're 12, the equivalent of 12 people enough to eat that lamb by yourselves, you're to get your neighbor. And it doesn't say get your best friend across the street, across the city. You get your neighbor. It doesn't ask if you like your neighbor. I've not come across one commandment of God, one instruction he's ever given where it says, if you feel like it, if it's your personality, if you think it's a good ideal, or anything like that. No, you just get your neighbor. And when I used to live in Greece, they actually did this. The Americans call it Greek Easter, but the Greeks actually called it Pesach, the same as the Hebrew word. They said they learned it from the apostles. And our neighbor across the street, the widow lady they didn't like, they invited her every year over. Anyway, she came over because that was the instructions. And your lamb was without blemish. Notice the lamb's inspected, not you. It's the lamb that has to be without blemish. The person be blemished can be all blemished. And male the first year. Now I'm going to need to explain that a little bit for people who aren't familiar with sheep raising. Sheep mate in the fall naturally, based on the X amount of sunlight. The amount of sunlight, and when it gets down to a certain when the day gets to a certain shortness of length, they start breeding. when it gets to, when it keeps shortening, when it gets down to on the other end, about 17 days later, after that gets too short, and they quit breeding, and they only breed during that 17-day period. And likewise, again, this is natural. This is natural. You raise them outside. You can interfere with that and actually get them pregnant early and have them breed early and have lambs born in winter, which is terrible and cruel, really. But if you do it the way God intended, you end up with your lambs born in spring, around the end of March, 17-day period, around the end of March, 1st of April. So this month has to be in that time period. Has to be at least cover some of that time period. So because this is when the culling of the lambs occurs. The lambs. The problem is, if your pastor's pouring all the sheep it can, and you have your lambs from last year, and new ones are born, you're not getting the pasture to go around. The sheep are going to starve. So the only thing you can do is get rid of some. So after you pick out the older ones, you're going to get rid of for various reasons. You sit there and set aside some of the ones of the first year from last year's that were born last year aside to replace the ones you're getting rid of, and the rest of them you're going to take to market, and particularly the males, because you don't need as many males as females. Just like you wouldn't have, you may have one rooster and 50 hens in a hen house, not the other way around. So it's primarily the males particularly are going to go. So this is what it means by male the first year. You have to cull the herd. It's called culling the herd. And notice you have a choice actually of dinner. You have a choice here of a sheep or a goat. So a Mexican friends can have a goat if they prefer. So let's continue on here with Exodus 12:6-10. And you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. The whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. They shall take of the blood and strike on the two side posts on the upper doorposts of the house, wherein they shall eat it. They shall eat the flesh in the night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread. With bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat it not raw, nor sodden it all with water, but roast with fire, his head with his legs, and the purtenance thereof. You shall have nothing of it remain till morning, and that which remains of it in the morning you shall burn with fire. Okay, several things, again, worth bringing out right here. Notice the whole congregation is to kill it at the same time. And really, the idea is kill it so it's ready to be eaten in the evening, as you shall see. So about 3 o'clock, everyone's going to get out there. Sometimes during the 3 o'clock hour, everyone's going to get out there and have to kill their lamb. So this lamb that their kids have been petting and everything, everyone's going to become familiar with. Now they got to kill them. This isn't an anonymous, strange, lamb. This is, and I want to notice there's even more to it there. Notice they got to take the blood of that lamb their kids have been petting and everything, and that's strike it on the side posts of their house, on the vertical and horizontal wood of their house, around their doors. And these houses typically only had one door, only one door, with a front door and back door, just one door. So you're going to put that blood around that. And then they got to roast it. And you got three essential non-negotiable parts of this meal: fire, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs. And maybe grape juice or wine to wash it down with. So, but that's not required. It's not required, at this point. It's just that, but these three are, you gotta obviously need something to drink. But notice it's got to be roasted. Now, I wouldn't eat things raw, but people do like steak tartare and whatever. They take hamburger and mix stuff in it and seasoning and eat it raw. But of course, nobody eats raw pork, because that'll end you up in the hospital or the morgue, which probably tells something about eating pork in general. Now, their heads and their head to tail. The entire animal's there. When I was in Greece, they did this again, and they gave me the honor the last year I was there by handing me the sheep head. Put on a plate, gave it to me. I was like, I can't eat something that's staring at me. Well, imagine this is the sheep that your kid's been out there petting for 3 or 4 days. How terribly sad this was. And the Greeks proceeded to argue over who got the eyeballs. And I told them I couldn't eat, something was staring at me. And anyways, Then they popped them. Then the withers popped them in their mouths. Some things you just can't unsee. Anyways, and notice that you're not that none of this lamb's be left in the morning. There's no leftovers. There's no takeout. Okay, there's no leftovers here. If there's anything left over, you burn it. It's completely consumed, just like the whole burnt offering is completely consumed. So this is kind of a partial two-part. One part is eaten, the other part, the rest of it's consumed, like the whole burnt offering. Moving on to Exodus 11 through 14. And thus you shall eat it with your loins girded, your feet on your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You shall eat it in haste as the Lord's Passover. For I'll pass through the land of Egypt this night. I'll smite all the firstborn in Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt will I execute judgment. I am the Lord, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the house where you are. And when I see the blood, I'll pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you, when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day it shall be to you for a memorial. You shall keep it for a feast to your Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by ordinance forever. Well, so notice this the original, the thing that there's going to be a moral of. They would eat it with haste. In fact, they're in a particular time frame, which we'll look at late. We'll see later. And they'd be all dressed up, ready to go. I mean, they're supposed to be ready to leave Egypt at any moment. This is not a lay down, relaxed meal at all. No 3 or 4 hours thing. You're going to eat it as quickly as possible because you don't know when you're going to have to leave. And notice the next thing. I will pass through the land of Egypt this night and smite the firstborn of Egypt and both man and beast against all the gods of Egypt. I will execute. Who's doing all this? I always heard there's the angel of death. My son one day told me, Dad, there's no angel of death in the Bible. I'm like, what? I saw the 10 Commandments, the Prince of Egypt, VeggieTales. There's always an angel of death, huh? I mean, everything I ever read. And this angel of death came from the rabbis. But it's not ultimately, but it's not an angel of death. It is the Lord that smites the land. What? He used a plague to destroy him. We don't know what that plague was, but it was quick. It was fast acting. And he is the one that's actually doing it. And that's a future lesson I may go over. It's actually Yah'shua who's walking through there. But that's another story. So, then notice we keep this memorial forever. This day should be the memorial forever. So this day is something you're going to remember from generation to generation. So, and we'll look at later how we're supposed to remember this, what we're supposed to do to remember it. Now let's go on to Exodus 12, 21 through 25. And then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said to them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover. And take you a bunch of hyssop and dip in the blood that is in the basin and strike the lintel on the 2 side posts with the blood that is in the basin, and none of you shall go out of the door of his house till morning. And the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians. When he sees the blood on the lintel on the 2 side posts, the Lord will pass over the door and not suffer the destroyer, literally destruction in the original Hebrew, to come into your house to smite you. You shall observe this thing for an ordinance to you, to your sons forever. And it shall come to pass, when you come in the land which the Lord will give you, according to his promised, you shall keep the service. All right, so, a few things here to a few things here to notice. Mostly is this thing about this hyssop. Hyssop's a plant that's also a bitter herb. We read about the bitter herb. It's one of the bitter herbs. It's eaten in the Middle East, particularly with lamb and goat. And it looks like it kind of looks like a paintbrush. It actually grows like out of the western wall. It's very common in the area. And you're supposed to take that and dip it and use that to paint the blood with. And so this hyssop has a a deeper meaning. I mean, David said, clean, make me clean with hyssop. Well, even on his body, some of his soul, he's referring back to this. Because this hyssop also, has some, it's literal hyssop, but there is another spiritual application, I guess. That's not the right word I'm looking for, but yeah. Now, notice this blood is precious. This animal, usually when they kill an animal, you just dug a hole, let the blood go in the hole, bury it. But this blood is precious. And so you're capturing a basin. And once the blood's on, you do not leave the house. And for believers, this is like when you come into the house of truth, you don't leave it. You don't leave it till morning, because what's morning? Morning's when you're going to leave the land of Egypt. You're going to stay. And notice the Lord again speaks that he will do the smiting. He will pass through and smite. Even if the destroyer was correct, he's the one directing the destroyer. So this is Passover is remembering a day of great death. For everyone, it was either you or the lamb. And I want you to notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say, if the Hebrews, I will pass over. The Egyptians, I will not. It says, whoever has the blood of the lamb on their door, I will pass over. So this was a day of great sorrow and death. It was either you or the lamb. This lamb your kid's been petting and playing with, feeding, named. Either it had to die and be eaten and be consumed, or you were gonna, or it was gonna be your family. Or it's gonna be someone in your house. Again, a day of great sadness. We're to remember it that way. No, it didn't say celebrate. This ain't a happy time to observe it, to remember this horrible thing. And we'll see why we're remembering this horrible thing a little bit later. And Exodus 12:26 through 30. It shall come to pass your children say to you, what mean you by this service? You shall say, the sacrifice of the Lord, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the house of the children of Egypt, of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses. The people bowed the head and worshipped. And the children of Israel went away and did as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass at midnight, the Lord smote all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh on his throne to the firstborn of the captives in the dungeon. All the firstborn of the cattle, really hoofed livestock, because the words also use the sheep and goats in their place, the same Hebrew word. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, and he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt. There was not a house, there was not one dead. Again, terrible death. I mean, notice the people bowed their heads. They weren't having a big praise and worship ceremony over there, time over this. They weren't bringing out the harps, the singing and dancing. This is a time of sorrow. But they worshiped God because they knew his instructions were necessary. And this is so bad. This is so terrible. Even the firstborn, everyone died. No one was exempt, not even Pharaoh. Or even the guy in prison. There was death everywhere. A time of great sadness. Exodus 12:31 through 34. And he called for Aaron and Moses by night and said, rise up and get you forth from among my people, both you and the children of Israel. Go and serve the Lord as you have said. Also take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. And the Egyptians were urged upon the people they might send them out of the land, and hastily said, "We all be dead men." And the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. So now, after 9 plagues, and sometimes Pharaoh trying to negotiate, no, you can go, but leave your wife and kids with me. The men can go. No, leave your flocks and herds. Take everything you need and just go. And he has to be blessed too, because what he means is he wants that curse reversed, because they're concerned that it's going to kill all of them. If they keep if they don't let the Israelites go, like the God of the Hebrews, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob said, they're dead, and they know it. Now, I'll explain about the dough before it's leavened. Because remember, they're told to eat with unleavened bread. Well, in some places, like Egypt, there's actually yeast, bits of yeast in the air, and that yeast, you make flour and water, and you leave it for a long enough time, it'll actually create, well, it's called sourdough, like sourdough bread, and it will leaven just from the air. And that was not uncommon. The quicker route was if someone already had some sourdough to split, and you dump it and you make your own sourdough by mixing that with there and make it quicker. But the slow route was more usual. In this case, it was what it was. So they hadn't had time for it to rise up from leaven that actually is in the air. Exodus 12:35-39. The children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed of the Egyptians silver and gold, and jewels of silver and gold, and raiment. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. So they lent to them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians. The children of Israel wandered from Ramsey to Sukkot, about 600,000 on foot that were men, besides children. And the mixed multitude also went up with them, flocks and herds, even very much cattle. And they baked unleavened cakes of dough, which they brought forth out of Egypt, and it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not wait, neither had they prepared for themselves any victual. Okay, so people said, well, look, man, they're out here stealing the Egyptians. Well, first of all, the whole earth's the Lord's, everyone's in it. He says, give something to someone to give it. But in this case, they have been slaves for a long time in Egypt, haven't been paid the wages due them. They're getting what's due them. And this is also, for those who've wondered, where did the material from the tabernacle come from when they're in the wilderness? Here's your answer. I also want you to notice the raiment. They didn't go out, and you may have seen in the 10 Commandments in some movie, all these, slave clothes. They all went out actually in the clothes of the masters. There's this showing that they're now being made the head, not the tail. They're all dressed like Egyptians going out, and not like the lowest class Egyptians. So this is all good for them. In fact, when they're going around the desert, the clothes that were out, they're actually wearing this Egyptian clothing. So, and then the next thing I want you to notice is there's 600,000 men on foot. People said, well, look, there be 600,000 men on foot, because Moses' genealogy is given. There's only 4 generations, from Moses, and maybe you might account for a couple more. Moses is 80 here, going out, and the 600,000 are men. We learn later of military age, between 20 and 60, not counting the Levites. But at this time, it's counting the Levites. So done the math and said, well, look, they have to have 12 sons each in each generation, and you can get this. Well, where they get the women? They all have 12, daughters too, or is it the mix, or is part of the mixed multitude? Part of the mixed multitude, because there's no, when they make the army late, when they divide into armies later, there's one for each tribe. There's no army of the mixed multitude, and they mixed multitude weren't like exempt. No, they were counted. They usually were sometimes eventually they're married in or whatever. They're counted as part of our tribe they're connected with. We're living among. And this mixed multitude was not a mistake. The rabbis sometimes like to blame all the things in the desert and the mixed multitude, but you look most time, like Korah and them are people whose lineage traces back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's not the mixed multitude that led Israel astray as much as Israel led the mixed multitude astray. Because the mixed multitude here are obviously believing God. These are not people, the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And why it says mixed, they're not just Egyptians. The Hebrews may have been building the pyramids, providing the labor, but the Greeks were providing the brains. There's mostly Greek engineers. In India and Arabia and places like that, extensive trade with Egypt. Egypt was the most prosperous country in the world at that time. There's even evidence from as far as Western China. Well, it was merchants. There's people were traveling back and forth. There's people, right? So it's all kinds of people from Africa, Europe, and even the people from as far north as southern part of Russia have been. There's been evidence of those in the Egyptian records. Scythians, from all from it's Europeans, Africans, and Asians. Pretty much everyone. It's not in the New World. There's some representation of them. Well, of those three continents, at least the main three continents, so are in there. And this dough, and now the last thing I want you to notice about this unleavened, because they were thrust out. This is a picture of the rapture. Arpezio in Greek. Harpezio, there's no H in Greek. There's not even an H in the Greek alphabet. No H sounds. In the Latin translation, that's rapturos, where we get the word rapture from. And there's a picture of that, because the worthy are going to be taken out, are going to be thrust out of this world. That's what arpezo means. I'm not saying the word right today, but yes, that's what it means. It means to be thrust out, snatched away suddenly, without any time to prepare. It won't wait on us. When it comes, and we're gone. And you got to prepare ahead of time, like the 10 virgins. Same with these people. Okay, let's continue on. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass into 430 years, even the self-same day, it came to pass that the Lord of hosts went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is the night of the Lord. This is the night of the Lord to be observed to all the children of Israel in their generations. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall no stranger there eat thereof. Every man's servant is bought for money. When you have circumcised him, then shall he eat thereof. And a foreigner and a hired servant you shall not eat thereof. Okay, now notice in the original, there was no instructions about circumcision. Well, I'm going to get ahead of myself here. Let's just start at the top. The sojourning of, who dwelt in Israel, Egypt, was 430 years. Not their time in Egypt of 430 years, not their slavery in Egypt, their sojourning. Well, what's that mean? It means living in a land that's not your own. The Septuagint actually says Egypt and Canaan. And that 430 year, and Paul quotes this, and also says 400. And the 430 years started when the day Abraham stepped his foot into the land of Canaan. So the sojourning began. The self-same day. So he did this on the 14th day. Really, it's the 15th day now because they killed on the 14th, so now it's daytime, of the first month. That's when he stepped into the land of Canaan. It's in exactly 430 years. And if you see 400, that's counting from when Isaac was confirmed as the heir, when he's 5, he's confirmed as the heir to Abraham. That's when he's weaned. Okay, so it's 400. So you end up with 400 years. But it's not 400 years of slavery. The slavery was only 215 years. It's 215 years too long, particularly if you're one of the slaves. But they brought some of that on themselves, which will be a future lesson. So notice this. So now we're going to start some instructions of how to keep the Passover. Not the original. That was instructions for that. These instructions how to remember it now. And the first rule is you got to be circumcised. Now, a good thing for a lot of people that wasn't the rule before, as we shall see, because practically nobody Would they be able to keep it? And if a man, remember, Abraham had to circumcise all of his servants. The household has to be circumcised, all the males in it. Really, or they need to not, leave, and that's kind of awkward. So, a servant, slavery, biblical slavery, somewhere it was more like indentured servant in America, without necessarily an indefinite end, than it was slavery in America before the Civil War. In the Bible, if a man killed a slave, the penalty was death. The master was killed. Period. If a man decided one of his slaves was hot, and he wanted her, he had to marry her. Period. If he beat a slave and injured the slave seriously, the slave went free. Period. I mean, the slave had some protection from the Almighty, because they also were made by God. Now, but that's not how the Egyptians treated these people, but that's how they were to treat people. That's what it's talking about here. So that they actually kind of considered part of the household. So they also have to be circumcised. But a foreigner and a hired servant don't have to. The guy comes over in my yard. I don't like. I'm like, all right, you circumcised? No, okay. If not, come here. We'll arrange that. No, he's a hired servant. Okay, Exodus 12:24 through 46 through 51. In one house it shall be eaten. You shall not carry forth out of the flesh a brile of the house, and it shall you break up bone thereof. All the congregation of the house of Israel, shall keep it. And when a stranger sojourns with you, you shall keep the Passover. Let all his males be circumcised, let him keep it. Come near and keep it. And he shall be as one born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. There shall be one law to him that is homeborn, and to the stranger that sojourns among you. And all the children of Israel, thus all the children of Israel, the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass the same self day, the Lord did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies. Okay, now notice, again, it's just, now again, in this remembrance ceremony, observation, again, it's in the house. This is different. We shall see. Remember, everything else, you congregate together outside the house in some place like a synagogue or the temple or something, tabernacle. But this one is in people's homes. We're not supposed to be congregating in our church building or synagogue building or Beit Knesset, house of assembly, or Tulsa, if you're Creek. Tulsa means gathering place. We're not supposed to be gathering in the gathering place. This is supposed to be out. This is supposed to be in our homes, and we're all to keep it. Well, who's all? Those who are circumcised, as we've seen. Now, so if a stranger who's not a servant, considered part of the household, one of these hirelings, whoever wants to keep it, they can, but they have to be circumcised. But they're not. But no one that's not circumcised should eat it. And it doesn't say no Gentile who's uncircumcised should eat it. It says no one. A Hebrew that's not been circumcised is not to eat it. A Gentile, a ger, stranger, not part of the people of Israel, who is circumcised is to eat it, and he's be counted as if he was part of the people of Israel, as if he was the son of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And conversely, the one without circumcision, because it's about being part of that covenant, not given to Moses, but to the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The sign of circumcision was given to Abraham. It's about showing you're part of that covenant, that part of that covenant. It's got two aspects, but that higher aspect, the more stringent aspect of it. So that's the rule. And by their armies, again, it's because each tribe had its own army, and inside of them they had armies inside the armies, so to speak, base clans or whatever. Okay, now we're going to look at some more of these instructions about the instructions about how to observe Passover. The Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, Concerning the feast of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. 6 days shall work be done, But the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. These are the feasts of your Lord, even the holy convocations which you proclaim their seasons. And the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. Okay, the first thing I want you to notice here is, I'll explain. The word feast here doesn't mean feast, because one of them you don't eat. It's a fast. It's not feast like we mean. This word here is moedim, and it's literally appointment in this section here. These are his appointments. Well, the only one that was prior, the one Abraham kept from Adam all the way up to this deliverance from Egypt, was the Sabbath. And even in Egypt, they didn't keep, they weren't keeping it under slavery, but it's the only one that got it established. When they're supposed to have a holy convocation. Like people might say a church service, synagogue service, something like that. We're gathering together for a purpose, not to talk business or whatever, but to hear about the Lord and learn to walk in his ways better and that kind of thing. A holy convocation and praise him. And, it's like a church service. You know what I'm talking about there, if you've ever been. So these are them. But notice that Passover is an add-on to the Sabbath. Well, all these others in Leviticus 23 are actually add-ons to Passover. This was given well after the instruction for Passover, which we looked at. And people said, well, because some of them complained about Purim and Hanukkah and even other things. And I went over this in my lesson on Purim. We looked at this very carefully, and there's 3 Hebrew words. They're translated feast or feast or celebrate. One is moed, which we just discussed, an appointment. One is chag, it's a religious holiday, but it's not just applied to these here in Leviticus 23. In fact, chag's only applied to 3 of these 7, and it's also applied to the new moon, which is not listed here, by the way. And the image of these 3 is a chag, and later it's going to be actually used. Now, chag's actually used to some other things. The other one's mishta, which is a celebration like when Isaac was weaned. That Abraham threw a big feast. The prodigal son's father threw a big feast. That was a mishta. So there's definitely no truth to this nonsense that you cannot observe anything other than what's on this list. Numbers 9, 10 through 14. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if any man of you of your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be on a journey afar off, yet he shall keep the Passover unto the Lord. The 14th day of the month of the evening they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. And they shall leave none of it in the morning, nor break any bone of it. According to the ordinance of the Passover, they shall keep it. And the man that is clean, not in the journey, and forbears to keep passing, the same soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he has not brought the offering of the Lord at his appointed season. That man shall bear his sin. If a stranger sojourn among you and will keep the Passover to the Lord, according to the ordinance of the Passover, according to the manner thereof, you shall do. You shall have one ordinance, both for the stranger, for him that is born in the land. So the rule is, the one rule we saw earlier: if you're not circumcised, you must not eat it. If you are, you must eat it. And if you don't, you're going to. This term "cut off from among his people" has been other places has 2 applications. One is, they just kill him, but more commonly, he's banished. You're not become as part of the people of Israel anymore. The people of God. The people of Israel who come in this covenant. You're outside the covenant. You didn't keep the covenant. You're out. You're kicked out. You're going to be banished. And notice it's the same true road that's a stranger or someone that's born there. But another thing I want you to notice here is, that this is another strange thing about this here Passover. This guy, in this case here, someone was unclean, and the instruction of the Lord was to have a makeup one on the next month. Same day, do all the same stuff the next month, a month later. There's no other holiday with a makeup one. People talk about Rosh Hashanah being the most holiest day of the year. Well, it may be in rabbinic Judaism, but it's not in God's calendar. The timing of all the other moeds depends on Passover, because that's how you determine when the first month is, when you're counting off, and so on and so forth. It all really counts off. It already hinges on Passover, and it's the only one. This is the only one with a makeup holiday. There's no Rosh Hashanah if you are unclean. You're unclean next month. We're gonna have the priest go to the whole Day of Atonement again, or any kind of observation, remembrance we have since then. No, you just miss it. You just weren't able to do it. But this one is the most holy day on God's calendar, on the calendar of Yah. Another thing here about the second month thing. Oh, whoops. I forgot one thing. I need to talk about this before I forget it again. At evening they shall keep it. What is even or evening? Well, it's the period between. It's the period between sundown and nightfall, and really, it's considered the end of one day and also the beginning of another. So, like the 14th day has an evening at the beginning and an evening at the end. The one at the beginning overlaps to the end of the 13th day. The one at the end overlaps to the beginning of the 15th day. And we shall see that, as we've already seen, it's plainly the 15th day. They killed the lamb on the 14th day, so it's the evening and ate after that, because you wouldn't make any sense to eat the sheep first. You kill it, then eat it. So this evening that period is about an hour, and that's actually when you're supposed to eat it. It's supposed to be eaten in the evening. During that 1 hour period, not hanging out singing Kumbaya, or not singing Kumbaya, singing Dayenu and so on and so forth till morning. It's be eaten in that one. The instructions are to actually eat in that 1 hour period. Not quite as hasty as they had to eat it, but still not exactly a long drawn out thing either. Now let's look. Now we're gonna look at another example of the second one. Now I'm gonna get to that. Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah, and two letters also to Ephraim and Manasseh. They should come to the house of the Lord Jerusalem to keep the Passover unto the Lord God of Israel. The king had taken counsel as prince of all the congregation in Jerusalem to keep the Passover in the second month. But they could not keep it at that time, because the priests did not sanctify themselves sufficiently, neither had the people gathered themselves together in Israel. The thing pleased the king and all the congregation. They established a decree to make a proclamation throughout all Israel. From Beersheba even to Dan, they should keep the Passover of the Lord God of Israel. For they had not done so at such a long time, at such a sort as it was written. Okay, now for those who don't know, the Assyrians took all the kings of the Divided. Only Judah and Benjamin were in the southern kingdom of Judah. And then the Assyrians took the other 10. Well, Hezekiah actually gets the two southern tribes. Manasseh's got land on both sides of the Jordan. Manasseh does. Ephraim, Manasseh takes actually takes their land back from Assyria. So he invites them. But he invites them to do this with him. And notice he even goes into the Assyrian Empire. Dan is the northernmost point. When it had the United Kingdom, the same was from Beersheba to Dan, Beersheba being the southernmost point. So he's inviting everyone to this who's circumcised, who won't mark themselves as part of this covenant, to come there. But the problem is they didn't have enough time to prepare properly. So they took the second month option. And because and if you read on, God is actually very, very pleased with them for doing this, because they're making an effort, and they're taking it seriously. They weren't like, well, let's just go ahead and do this, get it over with, or whatever. They took it very seriously, and they made sure they were prepared right. And Passover takes a lot of preparation. It isn't just the day of preparation right before you eat the meal. Like to get rid of the leaven out of our house, we started We almost cut off all our buying of anything with leaven in it 2 months ago. It took, and last night, yesterday we ate the last of our leaven. So, they didn't have time to prepare right, so we're going to do it wrong and try to get by the book first month. No, they took the option God gave them to go the second month. So if you need to do that, do it, and don't feel condemned. Particularly, this is the first time you're even giving consideration to us. Just do it in the second month. Okay, now we're going to look at the last of the instructions about how to keep Passover. One of the kids of the goats for a sin offering unto the Lord shall be offered, beside the continual burnt offering and his drink offering. And the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of the Lord. And the 15th day of this month is the feast. 7 days of unleavened bread shall be eaten. And the first day shall be a holy convocation, no manner of civil work therein. But you shall offer a sacrifice made by fire on the burnt offering of the Lord, 2 bullocks, 1 ram, 7 lambs of the first year. They shall be unto you without blemish. Well, this section here, Numbers 28 and 29, is all about the sacrifices, the regular scheduled sacrifice, not sin sacrifice stuff. And it starts with the daily sacrifice, and there's a Sabbath. On the Sabbath, there's an extra sacrifice, and then one right above us here, that ends in verse 15, is the new moon. The first of the month, there's a sacrifice. But notice these sacrifices in the tabernacle, then the temple. But notice there's no sacrifice for the 14th day for the Passover. The 15th day has a sacrifice, and so do all the rest of them. The day, the next day, the first day of unleavened bread. There's sacrifices for all these others, but not Passover. Well, that's because the sacrifice was not made by the priest, but by the people. And when they killed the lamb together outside the temple, and indeed outside the city. So it's another thing that's different about Passover. Besides the fact you do it at night, only thing you do at night, you do it in your home, you don't congregate together as a congregation, and there's no sacrifice when there's a temple. Well, we're going to wrap up the rest of these, last little bit here about this. Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover unto the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord your God sent you forth of Egypt by night. Therefore sacrifice the Passover to your Lord, the flock and the herd, in the place that the Lord shall choose to place his name there. Well, if you're all going to kill it together, it only makes sense for you all to be in the same place. If you're all going to kill the lambs in that same hour frame of 3 o'clock hour on our modern clocks. Our modern clocks based on the Roman time system. It makes sense that you're all going to have to be in the same place, and that place is not. We're not going to have. There's not going to be an election for it or something. The Lord Himself picked the place. The place can put His name on, which, He's there around the tabernacle originally, but then they revealed as Jerusalem from then on. And these are the last instructions. Deuteronomy 16:5-7. You may not sacrifice the Passover within your gates, which the Lord your Lord gives you. But at the place that the Lord shall choose, you'll place his name, and there you shall sacrifice Passover at even the going down of the sun, at the season you came out of Egypt. Shall roast and eat in the place where the Lord shall choose, and you shall turn in the morning and go into your tents. All right. So it doesn't matter if you live over, I think it's Bethphage, the house of figs. You're just like, well, I'm just over on the other side of the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives is only a Sabbath day walk. How about I just do it here and we call it good? No. You have to go to Jerusalem. Being close was not close enough. It's got to be, in Jerusalem. Technically outside the walls of Jerusalem, but yes. But yeah, and the place the Lord chose to place his name. That's Jerusalem. And notice as I said before, evening. It's defined by what? The going down of the sun is when it starts. That's when you're supposed to start your meal, not when it's dark, when the sun's at the going down of the sun, at sunset. And the instructions are, in the morning, you can leave Jerusalem in this context here, the place he chose, and go home. You're actually supposed to spend the night in Jerusalem, which maybe, might imply that maybe everyone should spend a night after the meal's over at wherever they held it. Okay, now we're going to look at how Passover was, how well Israel did in keeping Passover after Moses. We're starting in Joshua 5, after these instructions were given, I should say. We're starting over in Joshua 5, 7 through 11. And their children whom he raised in their stead, them Joshua circumcised. Because they were not circumcised, because they had not circumcised by the way. Now, who's that? I'll get to that. They came to pass, and they had done circumcise all the people. They abode in their place in the camp, so they were whole. And the Lord said to Joshua, this is the day I've rode away the reproach of Egypt from off you. Wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal to this day. And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. And they did eat of the old corn in the land tomorrow after Passover, leavened cakes, parched corn in the same day. You know the word corn throw you. It's just the old English word for grain. And in this case, it's barley grain. So notice that Joshua had to circumcise, well, this army of 600,000 men he brought with him. No, him and Caleb, actually. Well, why? Because the ones who did not enter in because of unbelief, because their unbelief didn't circumcise their children the entire time they were in the wilderness, which means either no one kept Passover except for Joshua and Caleb and Moses. I mean, Moses and Aaron and Joshua, they're very small, like there's maybe one lamb dying at Passover in the whole camp, or Joshua's house get a little bigger, maybe two, a couple, very few lambs dying, or people were violating it by eating without being circumcised. Well, Joshua is making sure we're going to do it the right way here. So he's going to circumcise. And notice when they get, it talks about rolling off the approach of Egypt from you. What? Well, there's that. Well, the approach of Egypt was being uncircumcised, the foreskin. The covenant, the mark of the covenant that God made, they were part of the covenant God made with Abraham, at least that part of it, was physical circumcision. And the Egyptians, like some people today, said, well, that's mutilation and terrible, even though they may do other things that they're very bad, like they seem to have no problem mutilating an unborn baby. But the same sort of evil, twisted backward spirit was there in Egypt. So, to go along, to get along, because the Egyptians were now their masters, that made the reproach. The reproach was that they were the tail, not the head. They weren't circumcised. Now Joshua's getting rid of that. You're being marked as part of that covenant with Abraham, that special part that includes physical circumcision. Then you're going to be, and Mark, you're the head, not the tail. And I want you to notice, they were still the people of God when they were circumcised or not. Before they were circumcised, what they couldn't do was eat Passover. The story actually says very little about circumcision, which I covered in the circumcision controversy. The mandate is you want to eat Passover to be circumcised, as it cometh upon the fathers to do it on the 8th day. 2 Kings 23, 21 through 25. And now the next incident after Joshua, and the one where we looked at with Hezekiah. And the king commanded all the people, saying, keep the Passover unto the Lord your God, as is written in the book of the covenant. Surely there was holding not such a time of Passover in the days of the judges that judged Israel, nor in all the days of the kings of Israel, nor of the kings of Judah. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, wherein his Passover was held to the Lord in Jerusalem. Moreover, the workers with familiar spirits and wizards and images and idols and all the abominations spied in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem did Josiah put away, and might perform the word of the law which is written in the book that Hezekiah the priest found in the house of the Lord. And like unto him there was no king before him that turned the Lord with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his mind, according to all the law of Moses. Neither after him rose there any like him. Okay, first of all, a little explanation about King Josiah is my favorite king. He's near the end. There's only 3 or 4 after him, and they have very short reigns, and then it's off to Babylon. But notice this is a long time we're talking about here. The days of Judges was what followed after Joshua and his generation died. It was a long period. The United Kingdom, the days of the kings of Judah, was 120 years. The king, and now Josiah's here towards the end. I mean, altogether, since the days of Joshua, it's been 900 years or something like that. I mean, it's I do the math. It's around 900 years. It's been a long, long time. And during that whole time, no one held a Passover like this one. Now, Hezekiah it's not been a long time. Well, that's how long. Hezekiah's first one since the time of Joshua. But he had to do it in the second month. Josiah was doing it in the first month. But notice the important part here about Josiah. Not that he's keeping this as much as why he's keeping this, because his heart's right. He has turned to God, the Lord. He's always loved the Lord with all his heart, mind, and soul, and strength. And he did this, so he did this. And the only king that's ever going to be better than Josiah is Yah'shua, the King of Kings. So so he kept this covenant. He kept this, but notice it's about the heart. And because his heart was right, he kept the law of Moses. That's why he got rid of all these abominations. And you read, he didn't just go on his own land. He went to the land over next door, the Jewish people that were living there, and wiped them out among them too, so they wouldn't leak into his kingdom. And he's commended for all this, as you just saw. So Israel's not had a good track record keeping Passover. Now we're going to look at the last case given in the Tanakh in Ezra after the return from the Babylonian dispersion. And the children of the captivity kept Passover on the 14th day of the first month. For the priests and the Levites were purified together, all of them were pure, and killed the Passover for all the children of the captivity, and for their brethren the priests and the Levite, and for the priests and themselves. The children of Israel, which come out against the captivity, such as had separated themselves from the filthiness of the heathen of the land, to seek the Lord God, did eat. Okay, so Passover is about what? Notice what it's about here. They kept this. It's about showing that they have separated themselves from the filthiness of the heathen of the land. Well, that's the people who aren't followers of Yah'shua. Really, Moses said, you must obey the one, the prophet rise up among you, you must obey him who does what required. Really, I mean, people aren't followers of Yah'shua, more particular. We're to separate. We should be living a life worthy of the price that was paid for our deliverance. Deliverance came at a terrible price. The price was death, not just of those lambs, but also of the Egyptians, the firstborn of all the Egyptians. And it was a terrible price to pay. Again, there's no mention of music and celebrating and whatever Passover. It's observed. And you're reminding yourself of the terrible price that was paid. So you could be delivered. And if you want to live worthy of that, you need to separate yourself from the filthiness of those who don't know the Father. Don't be watching movies and don't dress in their immoral clothing, their immodest clothing. And don't be watching their movies, listening to their music that glorify wicked things and all that stuff. Separate yourself from the filthiness of those who do not know the Lord. Speaking of the Lord, we're going to now look at we're going to look at him with Passover. Yah'shua, that is to say. Luke 22, 8 through 13. And he sent Peter and John, saying, go and prepare us the Passover we may eat. And they said unto him, where shall we prepare? He said unto them, behold, as you enter the city, there a man shall meet you, bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he enters in. You shall say to the good man of the house, Master, what say you? Where's the guest chamber that I shall eat this Passover with my disciples? He shall show you a large upper room furnished. There make ready. And they went and found as he said to them, and they made ready the Passover. So, first thing I want you to notice here is that this is the Passover they're getting ready to eat. The Passover meal, as I say, the Seder. There's no doubt about it. He tells them to prepare it. And this man bearing a pitcher of water, that was normally women did that, only in unusual circumstances. A man be carrying water back in that day, going down to the well or wherever and carrying the water. So that's how that man may not have thought what was going on, but he was being set up so the disciples would know how to find this guy. And apparently the Father or the Holy Spirit, someone spoke to the good man of the house, because the good man already had the room furnished before they ever showed up. He was expecting them. And when they got there, they made ready the Passover. And we'll continue in Luke 22:14 through 20. And when the hour was come, he sat down, the 12 apostles with him. He said to them, with desire, I've desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say unto you, I will not eat any more thereof until it be fulfilled in the kingdom of God. He took the cup and gave thanks and said, take this and divide it among yourselves. For I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God shall come. He took bread and gave thanks and brake it and said unto them, this is my body which is given to you. This do in remembrance of me. Like also the cup after the supper. This is the New Testament of my blood, which is shed for you. See, he wanted to do this Passover with them, because he knew he wasn't going to be around for another one. That grape juice they took. First, I want you to notice they divided among them. He had a cup, the cup. There's him and 12 people, 12 others. So they're all getting a sip each. Tonight they're getting 4 sips. Not like where I went to a congregations once, and a guy brought his own and drank 4 wines and drove home, and I poured a glass of wine. I only wish I'd known ahead of time, got his license plate. I would have called the cops on him. He's out driving drunk. But hey, the rabbi told him to do it, I guess. And you need to drink all this wine. No. 4 sips. Maybe you're like me, you don't drink alcohol, because I promised her grandfather I wouldn't. Me in my house, 4 sips of grape juice. But notice that this is not about this bread. He's making something new here. This bread is getting broken. It's his body that's going to be broken for them, and indeed for us. That grape juice represents his blood that was shed for them, and indeed for us. It was going to be shed for them and was shed for us. Our deliverance can only come through death, through his death. First Corinthians 23:37, Paul expounds upon this. For I received upon the Lord that which is delivered to you, that the Lord the same night which he was betrayed took bread. He gave thanks, he brake it, and said, take, eat, this is my body which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same manner, he also took the cup when he had supped, saying, this cup is the New Testament, New Testament, my blood. This do you as often as you drink, do it in remembrance of me. As often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you do show forth the Lord's death till he come. Whosoever shall eat this bread and drink this cup of the Lord unworthily shall be guilty of the blood and the body of the Lord. No, Yah'shua betrayed. You only be betrayed by a friend. The Greek word koine, translated, people use translates fellowship, literally means to break bread together, to eat. He's literally breaking bread. This bread's not a big loaf of Italian bread like on the Leonardo da Vinci painting The Last Supper. It's matzah. Remember, he plain. He told him prepare the Passover, and unleavened bread's required in the Passover. He's in the bitter herbs because it's a bitter night. It's not a joyous event. It's a bitter event. It's a bitter remembrance. And how much more for us who believe? We're not just remembering the lamb and the Egyptian slain to deliver for some of, or at least for some, whether you're grafted in or not, whether you're grafted in or natural born, deliverance of the people, your ancestors or your adopted ancestors from slavery in Egypt, but how his body was broken, beaten and torn for our deliverance, how his blood was shed like the blood of the lamb upon pieces of wood, horizontal and vertical pieces of wood for our deliverance. The price of our deliverance was high, and we should not treat what people call communion lightly. Which, in the context, we observed on the day of, well, technically, Yah'shua did the day before Passover, which we'll see in a minute, but in the context of Passover, we shouldn't be doing this lightly. And where Passover communion, so if you look at this in context, getting drunk is unworthy behavior. You're treating his blood, the whole thing, with lightness. And it was not a light thing. He paid a heavy price for us. And we should remember it. John 19, 14 through 20. It was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour, and he said to the Jews, "Behold your king." And they cried out, away with him, crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." They delivered him to be crucified, and they took him and led him away. He, bearing his cross, went forth to the place of a skull, which in the Hebrew is Golgotha, where they crucified him, 2 with him on either side, and Jesus in the midst. Pilate wrote a title and put on the cross. This was Jesus and the writing was Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. And this title then read, "Many of the Jews, the place where Jesus was crucified was nigh to the city, and is written in Hebrew and Greek and Latin." They knew how to prepare a Passover meal. He had it with them early, because at 3 o'clock, the 6th hour, in the way they count the day, they started at 9 as the first hour of the day. The time of the lambs were being hung on trees and killed. He was being hung on a tree. He was hung on a tree and killed. Their skin was stripped off of them, and his was, when he was flogged, so much more than Isaiah 53 says, his visage was more than if any man you can even tell he was a human being anymore. And why is he crucified? Because they demanded it, not really just them. We demanded it. So I read the New Testament through. I got to the part about adultery in the heart. Jesus started talking about all the different. He just started going to the 10 Commandments, because it was once I realized about my intentions, not just my actions, I knew I was worse than I thought I was. Your intentions are always worse than your actions. Don't, if you tell yourself otherwise, you're lying to yourself. Anyways, he got down to the part about murder. I said, I haven't killed anyone. He said, that's only because you've been denied means and opportunities. Yeah, thanks to those praying grandmothers of mine. It was true. People had done me wrong, and I want to bury them in the woods. But I said to him, but you know what? You know how terrible they treated me. Someone has to pay for what they did. And he said, somebody did pay. I paid. He didn't just pay for them, he paid for me. My hands are the nails to put the nails in his hands. That day may have been a Roman soldier, but might as well have been me. Before I surrendered to him, I was the one saying, crucify him. I have no king but the king of this world. The cost of my deliverance was high. But he thought I was worth the price. And I want to live a life worthy of him. And as you may have noticed, Passover and circumcision go hand in hand. And so does the terrible price he paid go a different kind of circumcision goes hand in hand. For circumcision, Romans 2:25 through 29. For circumcision verily profits if you keep the law. If you're a breaker of the law, the circumcision is made uncircumcision. Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not circumcision be counted for circumcision? Shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge you, who by leather and circumcision does transgress the law? For he is a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew, which is one inwardly. That circumcision is the heart, in the spirit, not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God. Excuse me, I have to use a couple of those aforementioned tissues. Physical circumcision is profitable, and I'll have a lesson about why in the future. A future lesson about why. But only if you keep the commandments. If you don't keep the commandments, you might as well be uncircumcised. But the uncircumcised, who aren't physically circumcised, they keep the rights of the law. Not all the commandments apply to everyone. But if the circumcised person is not even keeping the righteous, the bare minimal, the ones that apply to everybody, like not murder, commit adultery, which again is a matter of the heart, as I was saying. But the ones with physical circumcision is counting that, then even though he's not physically circumcised, he's going to be counted as circumcised. What? Not circumcised. He's not going to be circumcised in the flesh, physically, but if they fulfill the law, well, the parts of the law that apply to them. But those who have the letter, that have physical circumcision, don't transgress, they're going to be judged. Because the true Jew is not someone who just has physical circumcision. Nothing wrong with that. Yah'shua had physical circumcision. All the apostles did. But it's no substitute for the circumcision of the heart. And that's the true Jew. And this is not something man does, but God does. Paul didn't make this up. Shaul, he got this from the Torah. God said, when you return to me, repent. I'll circumcise your heart so you can keep my commandments. So that's why it says, if the uncircumcised by nature fulfill the law, they're keeping the commandments of the law, the ones that apply to them. And again, a future lesson explaining which is which. But we need to have a circumcised heart. That's what was bought for us at the cross. And we end here with these instructions about what to do if someone's, what does someone do if someone's not physically circumcised? They keep Passover? No, they've given something better, which we looked at earlier. There's nothing that says you can't have unleavened bread and wine. And why is it better? Well, here's why it's better. Purge out, therefore, the unleavened, that you may be a new lump as you are unleavened. For even Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Physical circumcision allows you to identify the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to observe a memorial of the physical delivery that came at the cost of the death of physical lambs and Egyptians. Really a terrible thing. Deliverance came at a terrible cost. But for us, our Passover is Messiah. We have a greater deliverance, a deliverance from eternal death, not the slavery of sin. And it came at a terrible cost. Therefore, it's incumbent upon us to purge out the old leaven, that old lifestyle, that we live like a new creature, because we have had our sin taken away by the blood of the Lamb and his crushed body. That's it till next time. Shabbat Shalom.